Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So today I'll be doing a tier list video all the bosses in Hollow Knight. And for those of you who don't know, I just completed a series on this game where I got 112% completion. And so I thought it would be fun to rate all the bosses in the game. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first boss we'll be talking about is the Gruz Mother, and basically it depends on when you fight this boss. So because this could be either the very first boss you face in the game, or you face this like around, it is either your third boss or maybe your second boss. But I would say if this is your first boss, it's a mid boss. But if it's like the boss you fight as your second boss, third boss, or maybe even a lot later, I would say this is an easy boss. I would say this is an easy boss for me because for me, my very first boss was the False Knight. Gruz Mother, there's really not much to talk about her. She's basically a bigger and much more beefier version of the regular Gruzes that you can find in Forgotten Crossroads in that area just outside the Grub Father. And all she does to the regular Grub is that she has a very slow dash attack that you can easily dodge by just jumping. And she has an attack where she starts slamming herself on the ceiling and the floor of the world. Yeah, honestly, not very difficult boss, and also it doesn't have much health. So yeah, pretty easy boss fight. As for False Knight, I would say this is mid tier boss. I know he's the first boss in the game, so it's technically easy. But for a new player, this is your introduction to Hollow Knight's combat, I would say. And I would say False Knight does like a decent job of introducing the game's mechanics. He's not a full introduction. Like there's still some stuff that you can learn, but that's something that the later bosses allow you to learn. But as a very basic introduction and getting the player comfortable with their controls, the False Knight does a good enough job. But anyway, the next one is the Brooding Moloch. Now, if you are a little bit knowledgeable about the game, you can fight this boss very early. He's supposed to be fight a lot later than like a lot of these bosses, but you can fight him as your very first boss in the game without any upgrades or even your basic abilities. And if you do that, I'd say this is a fair fight because this is a pretty difficult boss fight otherwise. Because you need to know, like you need to be first of all very comfortable with the game's controls, and you need to know about game's mechanics, like how pogoing works and how you can dodge his attacks. If you have that much knowledge, the Brooding Moloch can be a fair fight early on. If you don't have that, he's probably going to defeat you quite a lot. But yeah, as I said, this boss fight for a new player, I doubt they'll be able to find this boss early on. But if you do manage to make it, this is a pretty difficult boss fight. But if you just go through the natural progression of the game, you can either sometimes miss this boss, or you come to this boss much later on when you have like a nail upgrade, you have like 2 magic attacks and all that stuff. So at that point, it's not that difficult. But before, like at the very first, as your very first boss, he can be a little bit tough. But yeah, other than that, then there's the Vengefly King, and I'm not gonna lie, this boss is again going in easy tier. And I don't understand the purpose of the Vengefly King personally. Like, why does this boss exist? Like, we already saw the Gruz Mother being a buffed version of Gruzes. Now you just made a buffed version of the Vengeflies. Now technically he is a little bit different from the regular Vengefly. He doesn't like just slowly fly towards the player. Instead, he has a dash attack that he does towards the player, and he screams to call 2 Vengeflies to hit the player. I'm not gonna lie, that just makes this boss fight even annoying. The only thing he's memorable for is that he determines the fate of Zote. If you don't free Zote when you first meet the Vengefly King, then Vengefly King kills Zote. And that can affect one of the bosses that you have to face later on in the game. So yeah, Vengefly King I would say is a pretty easy boss. Hornet I would say is fair boss, and I would say if you just go through the natural progression of the game, this is the first hard boss in the entire game. And the reason is pretty simple. These bosses, they're all pretty large bosses, which makes the player character like you can easily hit them and then get away from their attacking spot because they're quite slow. Hornet completely flips that idea over its head. She's just as small as your character, but she's fast. So that strategy doesn't work. So for a new player who tries that strategy against Hornet, Hornet is going to punish you pretty badly because that's the exact way you fall into her attacks. And yeah, that can be a little bit overwhelming. So my advice would be to just keep your distance, let her come to you, watch her attacks, and only attack when she attacks. So first let her attack, dodge, and then attack her. Take your time with this boss fight, and this is the boss fight that will actually make you like more comfortable with the game's controls, more than the false knight at least. Then we have the massive mouse charger, and honestly, again, we already had the Venge Flanking and Glass Mother. Why does this guy exist? Well, I guess so that players can have somebody that they can bully. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I literally cannot think of any other reason for this thing to exist. But then we have the Mantis Lord's boss fight that happens in Fungal Wastes, and this one is easily S tier. I don't think I need to describe this. This is the boss fight that will prepare you for the actual game and its combat. So this boss fight is like, it starts off with just the one Mantis Lord trying to hit you. She does a lot of attacks. She can dash towards you, she can dive on you, and she can throw her this weird spiral thingy on you, or disc kind of stuff. She does it in two ways, so just be careful and maintain your distance. But the general strategy that I taught for Hornet, that just let her come to you, do the same with Mantis Lords. Don't just dash here and there, because you will get hit. And once you defeat the one Mantis Lord, the other two jumps towards the field, and they attack you then at the same time. So yeah, again, this boss fight will teach you how to basically manage yourself in like tense situations in Hollow Knight, and also make you like fast at using your controls. So not to mention, defeating them gives you a ton of stuff. You get 640 geo for defeating them. You get a Harness Seal. You get a Mark of Pride charm, which a lot of people like. I personally call it a grudge, but honestly, it's not that bad. And then you also get a free, easy access to Deep Nest, which straight away takes you to Cornifer, so that you can get the map early on, which is very useful. So yeah, this boss fight is S tier. Then we have the Soul Warrior, and honestly, I don't have much opinion on this guy. When I first faced him 4 years ago, I thought he was just a regular tough enemy. Like, I didn't even think of him as an actual boss. But yeah, not much to say about him. He has easy to dodge attacks. They can be, I guess, a little bit quick, but the problem is he takes too long to attack. Like, he does one attack, and then he walks around for quite a long time, like I would say 3-4 seconds, and then he does his second attack. And also his attacks can be easily tell because he takes a lot of winding time. So yeah, not a particularly hard boss fight. He has two versions of himself. The first version you fight inside of Soul Sanctum, and the second one you fight when you get the Elegant Key and you go for the Shade Soul. Now, in that version, nothing really changes. The only thing that changes is that he starts spawning in those weird husks things that spawn, in the Soul Sanctum when you get to the top. So the flying version of those husks spawn to help him. But other than that, nothing really changes in that boss fight. He remains the exact same. However, the boss fight that is good in the Soul Sanctum is the Soul Master. This, I would say, is a fair fight, and probably somebody I like more than... I actually like Hornet more than both of them, but yeah, the Soul Master is pretty good. Soul Master, he is kind of like the Soul Twister, which is a very annoying enemy, by the way. But he is not annoying, I would say. Like, at least not yet. But all he has a lot of attacks. He can dive towards you, and be careful, because dodging that dive through a dash is not enough. When he dives, it creates shockwaves that you have to jump to dodge. He can also shoot magic balls towards you, and while teleporting, or he can just spawn 4 of them around himself and then travel across the arena. I would say he can be punished quite hard when he does his slow dash attack, because if you just pogo off him early and then fire a Vengeful Spirit and you have Shaman Stone, he can get hit by one single Shade Soul multiple times, like 4 or 5 times, and yeah, that does a lot of damage to him. Defeating him otherwise is pretty easy, and I mean, to be honest, if you're a new player, this could give you a little bit trouble, but I think if you are got comfortable at this point with the game's controls, you should be able to handle yourself. You just need to keep your cool. And defeating him gives you the Desolate Dive, which is a pretty useful magic attack to get invincibility frames. But anyway, now from City of Tears, I would say your path diverts. You can go anywhere. You can go towards Deep Nest, you can go towards the Royal Waterways, or you can go towards the Ancient Basin. So, I don't know, I've ordered them to where you will go to Royal Waterways first, I guess. So the first one is the Dung Defender. If you go towards the Royal Waterways, this is probably going to be the very first boss you face. Probably. It depends on which side you take to explore first. But yeah, if Dung Defender, I would say. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I like Dung Defender more as a character in the game than he is a boss fight. So I would say the only cool things about the Dung Defender is that he has a cool music, at least when this boss fight happens. And he is a cool character. Otherwise, the battleground is kinda stinky and kinda gross because obviously, as his name can tell you, it's a shit ground, and he throws dung balls at you, and he dies into dung, and he then does multiple attacks either through jumping at you or jumping up and then throwing multiple dung balls all around the place that you have to dodge. One thing that I would say is that if you defeat Soul Master before Dung Defender, because you can reach him before this guy, the Dung Defender, when he's inside the dung, swimming around, waiting for him to do that one attack where he jumps up and throws 4 dung balls around himself, you can actually stop him from doing that with the Desolate Dive. So if you Desolate Dive while he's inside the ground, he will come out and get staggered, giving you time to heal or just Dream Nail him for soul if you had the Dream Nail at that point. Honestly, not that amazing of a boss fight, but as I said, he's a cool character and he has a cool music. So I think that's enough for me to put him in fair tier. And then we have Lukmarm. Okay, so now we can talk about the Crystal Guardian. So the Crystal Guardian, this is the only boss in the Crystal Peak map of the game, and this boss is piss easy. All he does is fires lasers. Like, he sometimes fires 4 lasers towards the player from the ceiling. Well, not even towards the player. He just throws them at random places. And he shoots laser himself as well towards the player's direction. Outside of that, he really doesn't have anything else to do. So not much to say about this guy. It's kind of disappointing that he is the boss in Crystal Peak, which otherwise is a pretty cool looking map. Anyways, next is the Broken Vessel. So if you go to the Ancient Basin, then this is the boss fight you face. And I'm not gonna lie, this boss is very easy. Like, I don't know, I don't have much to say about this boss. I would say he's at least like mid, unlike Crystal Guardian, which is just a really underwhelming boss in my opinion. But the Broken Vessel, I would say he's at least cool concept wise. Like, he's supposed to be a husk, just like a vessel, just like your player. But outside of that, he also is, I think, immune to Dream Nail. Like, you can't Dream Nail Broken Vessel or the Lost Kin. And because of that, I think that's pretty cool. So I would put him above the Crystal Guardian. But otherwise, this boss is like pretty easy by the time you reach him. So yeah, I would say he's mid. I don't have much to say about him. And then we have the Hive Knight. Now, if you venture deep into Deep Nest and you got the Tram Pass, you can travel from Ancient Basin to the Hive area in the Kingdom's Edge. And the Hive Knight, I would say, is a fair boss. I would say the things that I like about the Hive Knight is that he has a cool arena. His music for the boss battle is pretty cool. And I also like the lore that he's just trying to defend his queen. Though he is kind of dumb in the way that he thinks that she's still alive. But regardless of that, I think he's just a boss, just like the Mantis Swords and the Hornet. But honestly, I think the only thing annoying about him is that he spawns bees from the top when he sometimes does attacks, and during those bees he can sometimes attack you with other moves, and it kind of makes the things a little bit chaotic, which is why I don't put him in fun tier. But otherwise, defeating him is for new players, I would say highly recommended, because defeating him gives you access to the Hive Blood Charm, which is useful if you are going for the Dream No More ending of the game. So yeah, very useful, useful boss for that. But anyway, next up is Kingdom's Edge. And in Kingdom's Edge, the first boss that you'll be facing is Hornet Sentinel. So if you decide to take Hornet's advice and you go towards the corpse of the worm that the Pale King once was, you have to fight Hornet again. And here, I would say she's an even better boss fight. So she has pretty much all the same attacks as she has as, her Hornet Protector form. But the Hornet Sentinel is much faster. I would say about 2.5 to 2 times faster than the original. and she has the ability to lay down spikes around the field, which I would say thank God you can remove those with soul attacks, because if that was not the case, it would be so difficult. But yeah, that's what I recommend. Use your soul to remove those spikes while also damaging Hornet with the Vengeful Spirit / Shade Soul, whichever one you have at this point. But otherwise, you will have fun with this fight. Again, the same advice, let Hornet come towards you. Don't try and follow her, because Hornet Sentinel will definitely kill you if you follow it. So yeah. However, next you can go to the Colosseum of Fools at the top of Kingdom's Edge, and these 3 bosses are faced at the end of each of the 3 trials. So the first one you fight is Zot, and yeah, not much to say about him, honestly. Like, he's supposed to be a joke. What can I say? Like, I know he's easy, but like, come on, he's intentionally easy, unlike something like the Crystal Guardian or the Vengefly King. So yeah, not much to say about Zot. I think it's best if we just leave him there, because we know that even if we say anything to him, he's just in another world in his head, and he likes to live there rather than in reality. So let him enjoy his life ender or whatever. But anyway, the next boss that you fight in the Trial of the Warriors End is the Ob-Lobbles boss fight. And this fight, I would say this is I wouldn't say this is an easy fight, but this is a pretty mid fight. I would say the one thing about this boss fight is that in this boss fight, when you do it in Godhome, like on Ascended difficulty and Radiant, this is a very hard boss in there. Because avoiding hits from this boss is pretty difficult, because things get really chaotic with 2 of these around. However, if you use your magic attacks to like keep these 2 like in one direction, then that's good. However, if they are both separated, like they're going in different directions, that can be a problem, because you cannot heal them safely around these bosses, and that is an issue. But as long as you keep their positioning good, it's fine. The one disappointing thing about this boss is that when you kill one of these Ob-Lobbles, the other one that survives only gets 80 health, which is like nothing. Like one Abyss Shriek from Shaman Stone does 120 damage, and you just take away all of that buffed HP straight away. It would have been cool if that second guy got like 50% of the health, but even though the other guy becomes faster once you kill his partner, it's really not that big of a deal. Like, he's just one guy, you can easily beat him. But I would put them in fair fight, just because on higher difficulties like Ascended and Radiant especially, these bosses can be pretty tough. But then next we have the God Tamer, and this is a pretty mid fight. Like, the Trial of the Fool is so much harder in my opinion than Trial of the Warrior, and the God Tamer is in my opinion the easiest part of that entire trial, which is not something you want to hear when this is the last thing you have to do in that trial. So yeah, so in this fight, yeah, ignore the God Tamer entirely, instead focus on I guess this thing is a god. Yeah, focus on this thing and kill this thing. You kill this thing, the Tamer gives up and you win the fight. Otherwise, you have to first knock out that Tamer, and then you have to fight the god itself. But yeah, other than that, I don't have much to say about it. This is a very disappointing end to the Trial of the Fool, which otherwise is very hard. But other than that, we have Nosk next. So now we have the first boss in Deep Nest, and you know what? People do call Nosk as the little bitch of Hallownest. For me, he's not the biggest bitch, at least, I can tell you that much. But I would say he's a pretty good boss fight. I don't know if I like him more than the Soul Master, though. Okay, I definitely like the Dung Defender more than... I don't like him more than regular Hornet, but yeah, I think I would like the Nosk. Yeah, I think I really like Nosk. The thing about Dung Defender and Nosk is that the Dung Defender has a cool music. Nosk, on the other hand, actually I might like him more as a boss fight, but I do like the Dung Defender as a character. But anyways, the Nosk has a good environment. Like, when you go to his cave, you see multiple corpses tied with strings to the ceiling, and the creepy music that plays during this guy's fight. His mechanics, I think, are also decent. He has a, shriek that he does before rushing towards you, and then he can go to the center, he can jump towards you, and if he's in the center, he can sometimes spew acid all over the, battlefield. Now, there is a safe corner just below the, if you just hug the corner where the center platform is, you are completely safe from the acid attack. But The third attack that Nos does, which is once it gets to 50% of the health, there is it goes towards the ceiling and starts dropping acid on top of your location. So you have to constantly move. Now, to dodge that attack, simply just move. So, move slow. If you move too fast to dodge his attacks, he will cover the entire battlefield, and then you have to go backwards, and that can hit you. So my advice would be to just move slow while he's doing that. Or even better, if you just, take a weird route and go towards Queen's Garden before this fight, you can actually get the Howling Wraith's magic attack. And you can use that to hit Nosk while he's in the ceiling. Because he still is present there. You just can't see him. Or if you had the Grimchild Charm or the Glowing Womb Charm, the minion spawns from those charms also can hit Nosk while he's in the ceiling, which I think is pretty cool. Also, defeating the Nosk gives you a Pale Ore, which is needed for your nail upgrade, so that's pretty cool. Also, at least he's, he fits the vibe of Deepness, But thankfully, he's not annoying in my opinion. But anyways, the next boss would be the Traitor Lord. And Traitor Lord, I would say, is pretty mid. Like, even though his sisters may not do double damage like he does, at least they are not a copy-paste of the regular mantises you face in the Fungal Vase. Traitor Lord, on the other hand, 2 of his attacks are exactly the same as the smaller mantises that you can fight in the Queen's Gardens area. And then he has a Shockwave attack, which I guess it is cool and can force the player to use the Desolate Dive. Because otherwise, you have to wait on your Shade Soul. But even then, as long as you maintain like decent distance from Traitor Lord, you don't even need to do that. So yeah, the only thing threatening about him is that he does double damage, but in my opinion, that's not good enough. Not to mention, at one point in the game's history, he only did 1 damage. He was later buffed by the developers to do double damage. So yeah, I don't have much opinion on Traitor Lord. I think he's kind of underwhelming. And then we have the Collector. So if you collect the Love Key from Queen's Gardens, you can return to Kingdom's Edge and go to the Tower of Love. On top of where you fight Collector, who is just a straight up garbage boss in my opinion. Remember how I said that I will deduct points from bosses that use minions to do damage to the player? The Collector takes that concept to the next level. He only does damage to his minions, and the minions are an Aspid, a Vengefly, and a Balder. Okay, technically he can still do damage because if you're far away from him, he can jump towards you and do a swipe attack. But it's so easy to dodge that because he makes a very distinct sound when he does that. And that's the only thing he does. And he only does it if you're far enough. And so, yeah, the Collector is a stupid boss. This boss just wastes your time. I would say though he's harder he's a lot harder in Pantheon of Hallownest and the Godhome DLC. Because there, if you find him on harder difficulties, he spawns Primal Aspect and armored versions of Balders, and there's one weird Vengefly type of enemy that spawns only in Green Path. And those enemies kind of are they make this boss fight kind of messy. However, the thing is, a Primal Aspect is such a difficult enemy on its own. It is more harder to defeat than Gruz Mother itself. So I don't think that should give Collector a point. But anyways, next up we have the Enraged Guardian. So this boss fight, far as I know, is locked behind you getting the Mothwing Cloak. Or not the Mothwing Cloak, but the wings that you need for double jump. And I would say, again, I don't have much to say. He's definitely harder than I would say like all of these guys because he does double damage. But he's literally the exact same enemy as the Crystal Guardian. His lasers are a little bit more thick, so there's less room for error in terms of dodging him. But even then, just because he does double damage doesn't mean I'm gonna rate him much higher. He's needed for, I think, a Soul Vessel behind him. I think he has a Soul Vessel piece. But that's pretty much all you get for defeating him. But anyways, now that those base bosses are done, well, at least before the end of the game, now we can get the dream bosses that you will be doing in order to, beat the game. If you are going for the, Dream No More ending, that is. So the first one that you probably will face is Zero, which is the very first dream boss that you face in Resting Grounds. Zero, I'm not gonna lie, majority of these dream bosses are in the mid tier. I don't really have much opinion on them. A common theme among them is that they only have one attack that they either do faster if their HP goes low, or they just do it more. So in Zero's case, that's exactly what he does. Also, how disappointing is that he spawns 4 blades, Yet the only thing he does after spawning 4 blades is just fire 1 blade at a time at you faster. That's it. He doesn't even use all 4 blades towards you. I think that's kind of a dumb thing and I don't like that. No Eyes, again, same thing. All she does is just spawn ghosts. Elder Who, he slams like beads towards the player. And the only thing he's famous for is killing speed runs of Pantheon runs. Because if he teleports into weird positions, then you can't kill him quickly and that kills your run. Gorb. Probably the most memorable of the Dream Bosses if you ask me. And honestly, he's more iconic for what he says. You know, he's kind of like the Dung Defender. As a character, he's better than as a boss fight. Marmu, again, don't really care about this boss, honestly. It is a pretty hard boss fight if you are doing this Radiant though. Like, I would love to see a normalized strat to defeat Marmu on Radiant. Because this boss goes crazy. But other than that, on pretty much every other difficulty, this boss is not that difficult. Well, okay, maybe on Ascended also, this is a pretty difficult boss fight. Galien is the only other boss fight in Deep Nest, and honestly, compared to Nosk, he is nothing. But, you know, while all those other Dream bosses were in the mid tier, there's one that I have to talk about, and that is Markoth. And oh boy, this boy is going straight into Sucks tier. This is the most annoying boss in the entire game. So what this boss does is that he spawns with one Dream Shield. You know, like the player can have a Dream Shield with the Dream Shield charm. And unlike the player's Dream Shield, this Dream Shield does not disable itself if you attack it. So yeah, first of all, he has a way to defend himself. He just flies around the entire battle arena aimlessly. And he spawns swords that home in towards the player's direction. And then travel at like decent speed towards the player. The problem with these swords, however, is that these swords can sometimes spawn off screen and you will have no idea where this sword is and it will just hit you. Like by the time you realize where the sword is, you will get hit. And that is such an annoying thing to deal with. In his second phase, this guy spawns 2 shields, so now he's more annoying, and he spawns blades even faster, and that is such a painful experience to deal with. Now, the one time you can get attacks on him is when he starts to like stop spawning blades, but instead starts to spin his shield, and the shield slowly increases his distance away from him, and then it comes back to just in that rotation, it comes slowly towards Markoth again. Now, while Markoth, even in this base form, I would say is pretty annoying, the most annoying and most difficult fight of Markoth is easily in Pantheon of Harronest. Which I'm just gonna say that one part of Pantheon of Harronest is so sadistic because right after Markoth is Grey Prince Zot, which we'll talk about later. And my god, this boss is very hard. The only advice that I can give is learn to use Dash Slash from Nailmaster Oro in Kingdom's Edge. Just learn to use it. It is the only way to damage Markoth outside of your magic attacks, and Markoth will not give you the opportunity to hit him multiple times. So you're not getting soul from him. So yeah, that's my only advice. Just use Dash Slash and pray for pray that he doesn't pull off any BS against you. Anyway, next up is the White Defender, and I'm not gonna lie, I really like the White Defender fight. I don't know if he's in fair or fun tier. I think he can be the high fair tier personally. But yeah, White Defender is pretty cool. I like the music of the White Defender a lot. Probably one of my favorite Hollow Knight musics of all time. And he also has a cool battle arena. Now technically, it still has a lot of dung in it. But that battlefield takes place in White Palace. Which, by the way, how weird is this Pale King, bro? He has killer buzz saws, spikes, and now he has an entire room filled with dung specifically for the Dung Defender. What's up with that? But anyways, what I like about that battlefield is how the other 4 knights and the Pale King himself is watching that fight happening. I think that's really cool. Also, that trick with the Desolate Die to bring Dung Defender into a staggered state while he's swimming in shit. Yeah, that does not work on White Defender, so don't waste your soul there. But otherwise, the only thing he does outside of Dung Defender just being faster is that he has spike attacks. So he does them twice. One when he becomes a ball and then he slams the ground and spawns spikes that travel throughout the battlefield. So you pretty much need your Shade Soul or you need to use Desolate Die for iframes. Otherwise you will get hit by those. Though if you are close to the walls you can jump over them. But then again that leaves you vulnerable to his dung balls. So be careful doing that. Or he can spawn dung spikes when he's on the ground, but he slams the ground with his hand. And he only spawns 4 of them, so you don't have to worry too much about it. As long as you keep your distance, he's fine. I would say he's definitely a lot harder compared to a dung defender because of how fast he is. And the spike attacks can be a little bit of a problem because if you irresponsibly use your Shade Soul, you are vulnerable to him. But otherwise, I think he has a cool music, he has a cool battleground, and he's a decent boss overall. So I think he goes in fair tier. He's a high fair tier. And now Lostkin. Okay, just like Markoth, I hate this boss. This boss is stupid. Like, at least with the Broken Vessel, even though yes, at the very end, he does start spawning, those balloon orange thingies, I don't know what their name is. Lostkin spawns them constantly at an even faster rate than the Broken Vessel. Not to mention, this boss is so dumb. Like, I'm not gonna lie, the only way I have done him Radiant is by using a cheese strat where you use a Dream Shield and you use pretty much all of your minion charms. So Weaver Song, Glowing Boob, Grim Child, and Grub Song for Soul. And what you can do is you just go to the top of the arena, top of the corner of a wall, and just use your Crystal Dash, but just hold it so that you're locked into that position. The Lostkin will not be able to hit you, and your minions will kill him for you. Yes, it's extremely boring, it's long, and sometimes you can get unlucky and one of the ghosts that he spawns can hit you. But honestly, if you do it this boss Radiant like that, I'm not even mad at you. Because I literally did it like that because otherwise this boss is complete BS. He randomly attacks, whenever he wishes. He jumps around the arena in extremely awkward positions. Like I swear, I see him jump. I'm like, okay, he's jumping backwards, but then he jumps forward and just kills me like that. I have no idea, I'm not gonna lie. Dodging his attacks is so much easier, but dodging him in general, doing anything that he wants to do, it's just straight up BS, and I hate this boss because of that. This boss has been a miserable experience for me every time I've played the game, and yeah, he goes in a sucks tier. This may be my personal opinion, and maybe people don't hate him as much. I really hate Lostkin. I hate this boss. But anyway, then we have the Soul Tyrant. And oh boy, I have a story with this boss. So back 4 years ago, I had some friends that had played the game and were experienced with it, guiding me as to what to do. Now before you say that, that would make my gameplay, boring and would take away the charm of the game for me, and that I should have played it blind, but don't realize that my friends are sadistic and they like to see suffering. So what they did is that they tricked me into fighting Soul Tyrant by getting me the Dream Nail extremely early and then making me fight this boss when I only had a single nail upgrade and the Vengeful Spirit. And I didn't even have Shaman Stone at the time, because I did not have the money for it when I first reached Salubra. So yeah, as you could probably tell, that experience sucked. I spent 8 hours as a new player trying to defeat just this one boss. Now, you would think that that would make me hate this boss so much, but the thing is, if I'm any good at Hollow Knight, it's thanks to this boss. It's thanks to those 8 hours I spent on this boss is why I would say I'm decent at Hollow Knight. But yeah, otherwise he's just a very annoying boss. Everybody hates him because, at least with the Soul Master, when he starts teleporting around in order to do his, soul attacks, at least he's like, staying for like long enough to where you can get at least 2 or 3 hits on him. Soul Tyrant just does it so quickly, you literally sometimes don't even get a single hit and he just constantly zips around the battle arena and you are just confused as to where to look. So, yeah. But other than that, I think because he's the reason I'm any good at this game, I think I have to put him in fair tier. If not, he would have been joining the Lostkin down in sucks tier as well. And then we have the failed champion, which I think everybody can agree, hey bro, losing to this guy is completely fair. I don't like him as much as Nosk though. So the failed champion, yeah, The only reason people died to him is because whoever bothered to learn the False Knight's attacks. Because honestly, how could you? He's so slow, you can't even tell that he's actually following an attack pattern. And if you don't know that attack pattern, Failed Champion is guaranteed to kill you. He's about, like, I would say 4 or 3 times faster than the False Knight. He does double damage with pretty much every attack he does, except for the Shockwave attack and the, balls of lava that spawn from the ceiling. Those only do 1. But otherwise, you get hit with his club. You hit him directly on his body. All of that does double damage. And yeah, that can be a little bit jarring. But you can farm him for souls. There's a trick where once he is knocked down, you can hit this little bug who is controlling the armor of Hagamole, and if you hit him once, it resets his time for getting up. So you can just hit him once, Dream Nail twice, hit him again, Dream Nail twice, and get your soul. And then, you can continue the fight. But yeah, I don't have much else to say about it. I don't think anybody wants to hear anyway. But anyway, the next boss is Grey Prince Zote. Now this boss can be actually skipped if you let Zote die by ignoring the Vengefly King entirely. Now if you don't do that and you defeat Zote in Kingdom's Edge, that unlocks the fight with Grey Prince Zote after you save Bretta from Fungal Waste. But Grey Prince Zote is a pretty difficult boss fight, I'm not gonna lie. But this again, just like Zote, this is supposed to be a joke fight. So Zote was comically easy. Grey Prince Zote is probably one of the hardest bosses in the entire game in the most funny and weird way possible. Honestly, you know what? Whoever designed this fight, absolutely perfect. You nailed what you were going for, I would say. And because of that, I think I have to put this guy in fair tier. Like, this is one of the hardest bosses in the entire game, and I don't think I can rate him anywhere else. He has so many attacks that, it's hard to describe here in just like a short amount of time, because this recording has already taken 40 minutes. But Grey Prince Zote, yeah, he jumps all around the place. He causes shockwaves with pretty much every jump he makes. He, swings his nail in the most clumsy way, but because he runs so fast, you can get easily hit by those. Like, it's just pure chaos with this guy, and that's why it's so difficult. Because, like, while you're trying to focus on him, his minions can get you. His shockwaves that you did not notice can get you. Heck, sometimes he can just juke you by, making you think that he's gonna run with his sword out towards you, only for him to just fall on the ground, create a shockwave, and hit you. And yeah, that can be quite difficult to deal with. So I think he's fair. He's not a fun boss fight in particular. Honestly, I should probably put him below all of these guys. I would say he's at least a little bit more fun than them. No, actually, no. I don't think he's... I think he should be like here, around these guys. Because like, Oblomals are kind of the same concept, They make the boss fight chaotic. But anyway, now we come to the boss fights that are required to beat this game. So first is Umu, and this boss fight just sucks. Not much else to say. It might not suck as much as Markoth. Actually, it probably sucks just as hard as Lostkin as well. Actually, maybe because of my personal experiences, Lostkin probably is my least favorite boss in the entire game. But Umu, yeah, this boss fight is just there to waste your time. You can't hit Umu with anything. Like, if you hit him, he just doesn't take any damage. All of your attacks bounce straight off of it. And in order to do damage to him, when you first meet him in the library, you have to wait for Quirrell to hit him with his nail. That leaves Umu in a shriveled up, vulnerable state, and only then he takes damage. However, he only stays in that state for a little while, so yeah, try and get as much damage as possible. Also, Umu also tries to get away from the player while he's in that, state. So yeah, you really need to be on top of your game. However, the worst part about this boss is when you fight him in Godhome, because there's no Quirrell anymore. Quirrell presumably dies at the end of the Hollow Knight storyline. So yeah, if Quirrell is not around, then how do you make him vulnerable? Oh, you have to just shoot the core of other Umas into Umu. And if you have ever played through Fungal, not Fungal Waste, but the Fog Canyon, I think I don't need to explain how wonky that, controlling the mechanics of those cores is. And you have to hit Umu with that just to make him vulnerable to it. Yeah, I don't think I need to explain much about it. Umu, everybody knows he sucks and nobody likes him. Anyway, next up is the Watcher Knights. Now, I would say Watcher Knight can be... It depends on when you fight him. If you fight the Watcher Knights by using a pogo trick to, you can do a pogo trick in the room that is, just below the Watcher Knights to get to them. If you do that very early on, he's a pretty difficult. These guys are very difficult to deal with, especially when you don't have any upgrades. Now I know that all the bosses in the game scale with the power of your nail. However, even then, not having Shade Soul in this fight can be quite the difficult task to deal with them. Not to mention you can sometimes get to them without even getting the Dream Nail, which is, that just adds another level of pain against the Watcher Knights. So this boss fight is basically DPS. You don't need to do as much damage to these guys before more of them wake up. Though to be honest, only 2 of them can wake up at one time. But trust me, that's for a new player, that's enough to get you killed. Now, if you're looking for tips against this boss, if you ignore this boss fight and instead, like just before the arena of this boss, if you go up and break a breakable wall above, then there is a rope to a lantern that you can cut, and if you cut that lantern falls on one of the Watcher Knights, thus reducing the number from 7 Watcher Knights to 6, which is pretty cool, and it does make the fight a little bit quicker and easier. So yeah, definitely do that if you are struggling with this. But otherwise, I would say just get Shades, get Shade Cloak first from the Abyss and then come to do this boss fight. Because this boss fight can be pretty difficult. The Watcher Knights do like one attack which is just a regular 2 slash with their sword, which is easy. But the difficulty jumps up when they start doing their rolling attacks, where they can either roll towards you or they bounce up and twice to try and reach you. And that can become pretty difficult to manage when 2 of them are doing that at once. So yeah, just be careful. As for where I would put them, I would say they're fair boss. I don't like them as much as these other guys, but I think doing them early is pretty fun. But that is only advisable if you are like experienced with the game and you're comfortable with the game's mechanics and combat scenarios. If you're not, don't do this early on. You will die. But anyways, now we come to the end game. So the last boss of the game is Hollow Knight. And the Hollow Knight, I would say, is kind of a fair boss. I must say, for a last boss, he is not that amazing. Like, he has a lot of attacks, but most of them, have pretty similar ways of dodging them, which is just watch what the Hollow Knight does, and then depending on what attack he does, you either stay very close to him or you stay far away from him. I don't know. I don't think that Hollow Knight is that great of a final boss fight. But surprise, this is intentional because he's technically not the final boss fight. So I would say Hollow Knight is kind of a fair boss fight. I would say, okay, I'm not gonna be the YouTube RST and put the Brooding Monarch above Hollow Knight. I don't think that's correct. Like, that should be illegal. But I would put him above the Soul Master. I don't think he's better than any of these boss fights. I have much more memorable experiences with these boss fights than I had with the Hollow Knight. But as I said, that is, understandable because he's not supposed to be the final boss fight. The actual final boss, which only unlocks if you get the Void Heart Charm, is the Radiance. And the Radiance, I would say, is pretty high for a fair boss fight because this is supposed to be the final boss of the game. And I would say this boss fight definitely feels like a final boss fight. This boss fight pretty much forces you to use pretty much everything you have learned in the entire game. And this boss is extremely tanky, so you have to use your magic attacks here. If you haven't learned to use magic attacks and you have somehow managed to make it this far, you're gonna have a bad time. And I think that is fair considering, this is the final boss in the game. So I would say the Radiance is probably in the fair tier. Though, do I like them? I think I like her more than... I would say I like her even more than the Horn. The White Defender is probably the only boss fight in the fair tier that I like more than the Radiance. But the Radiance is a pretty good boss fight. But anyway, now we come to the DLCs of the game. So the first DLC is Troop Master Grim, and Troop Master Grim, I would say, is a pretty good boss fight. Okay, DLC boss fights are at this point the developers know what the players liked, how the player, the players are comfortable with the game's control, so they can just stop holding back and make decently challenging boss fights. I would say for the first time, this can be a challenging boss fight because Grim attacks quite fast. And while his attacks are once you learn them and they are easy to dodge, this boss fight still requires your attention. That I would say. Like, for example, bosses like Gruz Mother, you can just turn your brain off and just, spam your attacking moves and just easily beat them. Yeah, you can't do that with the Troop Master Grim fight. So even though, you're doing the exact same thing, it still requires your attention. And I think that's pretty cool. He also is probably the most handsome bug in the entire game, as many people have said in the game. And yeah, I think that he's cool. And then we had Nightmare King Grim, and this is the fun boss fight easily. I would say it's probably better than the Mantis Lords as well. So Nightmare King Grim, so you have the option of whether you fight him or not. Now if you choose at the very end of the Grim Troop DLC storyline to banish the Grim Troop, you don't get to fight Nightmare King Grim. But if you decide to complete the ritual, then at the very end you have to fight Nightmare King Grim, which is a much faster version than Troop Master Grim, and he also does a lot of damage. He's probably one of the hardest boss fights in the entire game. I would say this though, he's probably not as hard as Great Prince Zort, but I think before you learn his attacking patterns, Nightmare King Grim will absolutely wreck any player. Like even maxed out players will struggle against Nightmare King Grim because he's just supposed to be hard. And also a fun fact about Nightmare King Grim, he and Radiance are the only bosses in the game that have a screen specifically appear for them to announce their name, which I think is just badass. Not to mention his battle arena is pretty cool, especially in God Home. I really like the God Home version of this boss in Pantheon of Harness. That battlefield just looks sick. So yeah, he's absolutely amazing. Anyway, now we come to the God Master DLC, the final DLC of the game and the final 6 bosses or 7 bosses. But yeah, let's start with the first boss that you fight at the end of the Pantheon of Masters, which is the first Pantheon that you have to do. And this is Brothers Oro and Mato. And honestly, I would like to it was really a treat to watch these guys, fight together if you know their story from the game. However, I would say these guys are definitely much more cool as characters, just like Dung Defender is, than their actual boss fights. Because unfortunately, I have heard people call them a Watcher Knight clone, and unfortunately, that's kind of true, which is unfortunate. Because like their slashing attacks are exactly the same as the Watcher Knight, except they are a little bit bigger and tankier. But otherwise, they have unique attacks. I do like the fact that they use their, signature nail art as well against the players. But otherwise, their attacks are kind of, like mid, I would say. But I would still put them fair fight. Like, I would say they're still fair. They're better than these guys, but not as good as the others. And then we have Paint Master Shio, which, by the way, how badass of a concept is it that, you bring a paintbrush to a sword fight and you still manage to kick ass. I think this is a pretty good boss fight. The only disappointing thing is that this guy does not have a custom background for himself, like, Grim, the Absolute Radiance, and the Pure Vessel has in the God Home. Nor does he have a signature tune for himself, which I think is super disappointing. He has the same tune that pretty much every boss has in the God Master DLC, which is very disappointing. I think because of that, I have to put him in fair tier. But Paint Master Shio is definitely better than like all of these guys. He's probably even better than these guys. Yeah, he's a fun boss. Also, just looking at the colors that he makes fly around the battlefield is just fun. So I think this guy easily gets into the fair tier. And then we have Great Nail Sage Sly. Now, how many of us, just a question here, thought that Sly was just BSing when he was praying to that nail, giving the impression that yeah, he can definitely work with that nail. Because I'm not gonna lie, when I first got all the nail arts and visited his basement in his shop, I don't believe this dude could use that sword at all. And oh boy, how wrong he proves me, because he is a pretty tough boss fight. And honestly, I don't know if I like him more than Paint Master Shio though. I definitely like him. I know people don't like him too much, especially because of his second phase where he just, starts jumping all over the goddamn area, and then as soon as he gets close to you, he starts spinning his blade and does damage. Like, I get it, that's kind of difficult, and he definitely doesn't allow the player to heal at all at that point. But I must say, I still like him a lot. He's a pretty cool boss fight, and I like it. Anyway, the next boss fight is Sisters of Battle. So now all of these boss fights, except for the Pure Vessel, you face in Pantheon of Harnest. Sisters of Battle is easily S tier. Like Mantis Lords in general was just a great boss fight, and Sister of the Battle just makes it even better. Honestly, I think it's even better than Nightmare Kingdom. It's not harder, mind you, but it's just so fun. It's extremely fast, and the change here is that not only the Mantis Lords boss fight becomes faster in Sisters of Battle, but all three of the sisters attack you at the same time rather than just two of them, and then like at first only one attacks you and then the other two attack you. No, here all three attack you at once, and it's just very cool. This boss fight just is like quick, extremely quick, and it makes you feel very good. Like it makes you feel accomplished that you have done something in the game to be able to, like dodge their attacks while also damaging them at the same time. It's just really cool. I like it. But anyway, next up is Winged Nosk, and somebody posted a meme about this guy in the Vengefly King where Nosk asked Vengefly King to show him his homework, and Vengefly King said, "Hey bro, copy my homework, but make sure that you make it a little bit different so that the teacher doesn't notice." And the result of that is Winged Nosk. And honestly, yeah, people are correct. The only thing Winged Nosk does different from Vengefly King is that he can sometimes spit acid towards you. Not to mention he also ruins the ceiling attack that the regular Nosk has. Like, why did they ruin this guy? Especially also because this is the version of Nosk that makes it towards he disguises himself as Hornet rather than the player character. So the original Nosk disguises himself as the player character, but he disguises himself as Hornet, which is supposed to be the mascot of Silsong. Like, bruh, yeah, this boss sucks. I would say, yeah, he's definitely going down there. He doesn't suck as much as these guys, but the fact that you have to fight, he's only available in P5 is stupid. He should have been in the first Pantheon or something, in my opinion. But anyway, now we have the last two bosses, and now we have Pure Vessel, and this is probably the best fight in the entire game. I have seen the Reddit, I think 4 years ago or 3 years ago, where people were just jawing, I would say, the entire time about how cheap the Pure Vessel is because he's just a copy of Hollow Knight. He doesn't have any different attacks. He's just so hard. To all those people, I just want to say, get good at the game, bro. Get good at the game, and then do the Pantheon of Harnest, and just look how excellent of a boss fight this thing is. He's not a cheap copy of Hollow Knight. Don't even bring that garbage. He's not like that. He's literally the best boss fight in the entire game, in my opinion. He's my favorite boss in the entire game as well, which is why he's at the top of S tier. I don't know who designed Pure Vessel's entire boss fight, not just Pure Vessel himself, but the entire boss fight, the arena, the music, and him as well as the penultimate boss for people. He's the most fitting boss for the penultimate spot of the Pantheon of Harnest. I cannot explain how perfect this boss is. Words cannot describe how perfect he is as the penultimate boss fight of that Pantheon. And even individually, he is just so much fun. And then finally, at the end of this video, we can rate the final boss of the entire game, which is Absolute Radiance. And honestly, the only thing this boss fight is memorable for is that most people, after making it through 45 bosses, die to this thing because it's virtually impossible to beat this boss on your first attempt because of just how hard it is. I would say this is also in fun tier, but honestly, I can't say much about it. By this point, I'm just so exhausted in P5 that, I just want it to end. But yeah, I would say otherwise it's pretty cool. It's a much harder version than the Radiance. It still does double damage, but it's much faster and on harder difficulties. I've seen people talk about, in Reddit that it combines attacks. It actually becomes faster than in easier difficulties, and I think that's actually true. I definitely have seen it combine attacks. Though to be honest, while that makes this boss pretty difficult, it's supposed to be difficult, guys. This is the last boss of the entire game. So, yeah. I would say it's fun. But, yeah, people's opinion might be different on it. But yeah, other than that, here you go, guys. This is the final tier list that I have that for all the bosses of Hollow Knight. So, if you liked what you see, then make sure to leave a like on this video, as it helps with the algorithm and shows me that you like watching this kind of content. Otherwise, do subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, and in the comment section do tell me your opinions on all of these bosses. But other than that, Have a great day, everyone, and I hope to see you all in the next one.